You could even make a strong argument that the only reason Gon didn't destroy the owl and bat instantly was because he was fighting in the dark and couldn't even see them. Hey, what's up everybody? It's LeeLos, and today we're talking about why Kite versus the Phantom Troupe is obvious. Stay steady in pursuit of your dreams and goals. You're born to win, you're made for greatness, and I definitely believe in you guys. Keep up the great work each and every day. So, Kite versus the Phantom Troupe is a battle between the student of Jing Freaksis versus a group of some of the most legendary bandits in the entire world of Hunter x Hunter. Today we're going to analyze every single power-up and ability these monsters have displayed to find out overall how strong is Kite compared to the members of the Phantom Troupe. From the moment of Kite's introduction in the 2011 anime, he's immediately depicted as being insanely powerful. Kite was so strong that he takes on the role of guiding Gon and Killua after they complete Greed Island, and he still outclasses them both by a very large margin. So much so that Killua states, even after losing one arm, Kite was still stronger than Gon and Killua working together. Killua also says that if Gon and Killua weren't there, Kite would not have lost an arm in the initial confrontation with Pitou. Despite this, Kite was still so strong that he was able to hold Pitou off long enough for Killua to escape the forest entirely. It should be noted that Pitou did not have a Hatsu ability yet during this battle, and Pitou states its goal was to figure out how strong it was. So an argument could be made that Pitou wasn't immediately trying to kill Kite. Regardless, holding off a royal guard with one arm in any capacity is still extremely impressive. Clearing Greed Island is an incredible feat, with countless hunters trying and failing over the years. Meanwhile, Gon and Killua were able to clear the game with less than a year of effort. As a result, Gon and Killua at the start of the Chimera Ant arc were strong enough to defeat officer ants in 1v1 battles, something other pro hunters like Pokal failed to do. Both Gon and Killua had battles with officer ants where the officers landed attacks on them. Meanwhile, Kite not only kills a squadron leader ant effortlessly, he one-shots an entire horde of officer ants without even taking damage, further showing the gap in strength between Gon, Killua, and Kite. Kite's Hatsu ability is a roulette power that picks a number 1 through 9 at random, each number representing a different weapon, meaning Kite cannot choose which weapon he gets, and once Kite gets a weapon, he cannot exchange it or put it away until it's used. Every weapon Kite used, he complained that it was a bad spin. Despite this, each time the weapon perfectly fit his current situation. Against a horde of officers, he pulled the scythe, which could take out multiple enemies at once. Against the singular squadron leader, he pulled the rifle, and against someone stronger than him, he pulled a reincarnation ability. There may be some hidden condition connected to why each weapon fit his situation so well, or maybe it was just pure coincidence. We only saw 3 of Kite's 9 weapons, and we still don't know what his other 6 weapons are, but a highball implication is that he has a weapon so powerful that everything he displayed truly is a bad spin in comparison. A hypothetical good spin weapon with the lowest probability of being drawn, in theory, could be a condition that makes it extremely powerful, sort of like a legendary or rare draw in a video game. All that being said, how does Kite compare to the members of the Phantom Troupe? The Phantom Troupe is extremely impressive, especially compared to York New City arc Gon and Killua. However, as the series progresses, we learn more about the Phantom Troupe's weaknesses, essentially showing us that they are strong but not invincible. During the Chimera Ant arc, the Phantom Troupe fight against officer ants that have Nen. Kaluto is surprised with how quickly the troupe defeats their opponents, and is heavily implied to be one of the weakest members of the troupe, but analyzing their fights reveals something about the troupe's abilities. Bonolenov's first Hatsu attack did 0 damage to an officer ant. Finks's initial attack without Hatsu did 0 damage to an officer ant. You can make a good argument that Shizuku actually struggled with Pokal, and Shalnark got physically overpowered by a peon ant that couldn't even speak, and had to use his autopilot ability to break free, something that strains his body so much that he's sore for days afterwards. Meanwhile, end of Chimera Ant arc, Gon and Killua defeat multiple officer ants with Nen at the same time. Many of them they beat without even using their Hatsu abilities. You could even make a strong argument that the only reason Gon didn't destroy the owl in battle that instantly was because he was fighting in the dark and couldn't even see them, forcing him to put more aura into defense. There's a real possibility that if they fought in the daytime, Gon would have beaten them both without Hatsu, and he wasn't even angry the same way that he was during the Chimera Ant Palace invasion. End of Chimera Ant arc, Gon and Killua were considerably more powerful than they were at the start of the arc when they were on a mission with Kite. But the tough reality is, you could make a good argument that Gon and Killua did better against the officer ants than many of the Phantom Troupe members did. Furthermore, Nobunaga states that his maximum end radius is only 4 meters. Later in the Succession War, Finks admits that he's so bad at using N that he can't use N if he's walking, if someone's talking to him, or if anything within his N's radius moves. Phaeton's N radius is not stated, but he's so bad at using N that he recommends Finks to use his N instead of Phaeton using his own, implying that Phaeton's N may be even worse than Finks's. Meanwhile, throughout the Chimera Ant arc, we see Kite effortlessly doing all these feats, maintaining N for the entire night while guiding and mentoring Gon and Killua at the same time. The anime states that an N radius of 50 meters is something Nen masters are capable of. Therefore, according to the 2011 anime, Nobunaga, and likely both Finks and Phaeton, despite being very powerful Nen users, are not yet considered full-fledged Nen masters. Meanwhile, Kite is stated to be likely even stronger than a Nen master due to using his N the entire night while tracking LeeLos. With the manga, it's a bit more debatable. You could argue that if you just use the manga translation, maybe characters can be a Nen master without mastering N. For example, maybe you could be a master enhancer like Uvagen claims to be, even if you never master N. Thus, you would technically be a Nen master in your category, despite not knowing some advanced Nen techniques. But in the anime, it's much more straightforward about it. Nen masters can make an N radius of 50 meters. Regardless of using manga or anime translations, Kite massively outscales the weaker Phantom Troupe members. Shalnark, Shizuku, Kuratopi, Paku, Bonolenov, and Machi have a very low chance of defeating Kite in a 1v1 battle. He outstats and outskills them too considerably for it to be a challenging fight. You could make an argument for Palace Invasion Gon beating nearly everyone I just listed. In complete honesty, you can have a good debate about whether or not Enraged Gon would be capable of beating Bonolenov or Machi now, especially when you consider he learned how to charge rock while running. Essentially, these members of the Phantom Troupe just are not on Kite's level yet. Shalnark might be able to get extremely lucky and land the autopilot attack on Kite and win the battle that way, but seeing how he got overpowered by a peon ant and couldn't even land a needle attack on a peon ant without taking damage, it's far more likely that Kite would just blitz him and win the battle, or just kill Shalnark with a long range attack before Shalnark could use autopilot mode. Using the anime interpretation, Kite is a stronger overall Nen user than Finks, Nobunaga, and Phaeton. These battles would be high difficulty, and it should be noted that you could argue that Phaeton has a win condition. If he lands Painpacker, it's essentially a guaranteed victory. However, there's a chance that depending on the roulette draw, Kite's first attack may just defeat Phaeton. If Kite has an ability so strong that it makes the scythe look like a bad spin in comparison, I'd argue that would kill Phaeton. Seeing how Ramot survived Gon's rock, but the scythe took out a horde of officer ants, some saying they were 10 times stronger than others, you could make an argument that the scythe scales above start of Chimera Ant arc Gon's rock and attack potency. If Kite has something so strong that the scythe is weak in comparison, it's hard to make a claim for Phaeton surviving that. Also, the fact that Phaeton's Hatsu requires him to take damage first before he can use it is quite the problem for Phaeton. All that being said, you can make arguments for either Phaeton or Kite winning, but I'd argue that Kite is slightly more likely to win. Finks is at a type disadvantage going against Kite, despite them being relative in stats. Kite has shown numerous long-range attacks. Meanwhile, Finks has only displayed close-range abilities, so despite it being a close battle, the type disadvantage would give Kite a slightly greater probability of winning against Finks. Furthermore, with Nobunaga, we don't even know his Hatsu ability, but Nobunaga being so terrible at N, meanwhile Kite is very skilled at it, leads me to believe that Kite is simply the more skilled Nen user. It's debatable about how the battle would go, but I'd lean towards Kite being more likely to defeat Nobunaga. Franklin has 0 feats in the series whatsoever. He chopped his fingers off, which gave him a conditional Nen of finger bullets that are are stronger than normal bullets, and he thinks he could handle fighting Hisoka on his own. But to be completely honest with you, a large portion of the fandom just thinks Franklin is wrong, and maybe even slightly delusional. He's weaker than Hisoka in Finks and arm wrestling. To be honest, I view him as relative to Nobunaga, with a very limited Hatsu ability. Therefore, I lean towards Kite defeating him as well, simply due to having a wider arsenal. Having 9 different weapons that Kite can keep switching through as he fights his opponents is a big advantage against someone with just one weapon like finger bullets. Kite is more likely to find Franklin's weaknesses and adapt to him mid-battle. Meanwhile, Franklin has to constantly adapt to Kite's new attack. Uvogin is powerful, but it's stated that he struggles against people with tricky abilities. Kite would most likely outsmart Uvogin with his arsenal of weapons and kill him around high difficulty, especially when we consider the fact that Uvogin started out his battle with Kurapika at only 20% power. If he fights in a similar way against someone as powerful as Kite, he's essentially just asking to get destroyed. Kite is too powerful of an opponent to be holding back against. Finally, the most challenging fights would be against Hisoka, Illumi, and Chrollo. In complete honesty, each of these fights could have a video on their own. Both sides would have win conditions over the other, but I'd argue Hisoka and Chrollo are slightly more likely to defeat Kite. Meanwhile, with Illumi, it's just about a 50-50 split. Chrollo is relative to Kite in stats and abilities, but he has an even larger arsenal and has much more freedom of which ability he's using. Chrollo, with his bookmark ability, can actually use multiple abilities at the same time without even holding his book. His Hatsu is honestly just a better version of Kite's. Therefore, I say Chrollo is slightly more likely to defeat Kite, even though they both have win conditions over each other. Furthermore, if you view Chrollo as being relative to Kite in overall stats, then you can make an argument for Hisoka scaling above Kite in raw strength and defense due to some statements in the Chrollo versus Hisoka fight that implied that Hisoka scaled above Chrollo in raw strength and defense. When it comes to Hisoka, there's a lot of different ways this fight can go. Now, Hisoka's grown so powerful that Chrollo, even though he still has his bookmark ability, is now risking his life to evolve his Hatsu ability to a level it's never been at before he challenges Hisoka. And Chrollo states, if he fights this new version of Hisoka before he's entirely ready, then he might die. This implies that this current version of Hisoka is stronger than the bookmark Chrollo. Furthermore, Hisoka continuously gives his opponent advantages and wins anyway, and his improvisation skill is so impressive that it may even be greater than a genius like Chrollo's. So much so that despite already having many different abilities back in the York New City arc, Chrollo chose to spend a very large portion of time gaining even more abilities before he stated he had a 100% chance of victory against beating Hisoka. Seeing how even Chrollo thinks Hisoka would be challenging to defeat despite his massive arsenal, I believe Hisoka would be able to handle Kite's 9-weapon arsenal, especially the post-mortem Nen version of Hisoka, who now Chrollo thinks may scale above even his current bookmark self. With Illumi, it could go either way. If he lands a needle on Kite, it may one-shot him, and if Kite hits Illumi with a scythe or a weapon of relative or greater strength, it may one-shot Illumi. We don't know either of their full abilities. However, if Illumi has an autopilot mode, just like Shalnark, and can hit himself with a needle and enter a Super Saiyan-like form of his own, then I would say that Illumi is simply more likely to win. That's everything I wanted to say. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see ya on the next one.